Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. There's a kind of quiet that only arrives after midnight. A hush that wraps around the room, soft but unmistakable. It doesn't matter whether you're lying in a familiar bed or curled up on the couch. The silence feels heavier than it did just a few hours ago. The air seems denser, the stillness more complete. And in that space, thoughts begin to surface. Not loud, not fast, but steady, gentle, sharp. Everyone else has someone. If I mattered to someone, nights wouldn't feel like this. I'm falling behind. There's no need to push those thoughts away here. They're not evidence of brokenness. They're simply visitors that tend to arrive with the dark. And if they're visiting you tonight, you're not alone. This channel exists for these quiet hours, for the places the world forgets to explain, the places where discomfort is often labeled as failure, when really, it's just the mind trying to understand something in a moment when everything else has gone still. You're not broken for noticing the ache, and you're not imagining it either. It is real, the way night pulls certain thoughts forward, like low tide revealing what was hidden all day. But just because something feels louder doesn't mean it has more truth. It only means the room got quieter. The brain responds to that silence in very specific ways. It amplifies, it searches, it begins filling in blanks that daytime distractions never let you notice. And when you're alone, not just physically, but emotionally, those blanks often get filled with hard, unspoken questions about your worth, your timing, your story. But here's the gentle truth. Night doesn't define you. It magnifies you. It takes what's already been quietly carried and turns up the volume. Not because something's wrong, but because the stimulation has gone. So if tonight, the weight of being single feels especially sharp, not just noticeable, but meaningful, know that this isn't your fault. It isn't a personal verdict. It's your biology, your nervous system, your sensory input shifting, your emotional regulation softening. It's not weakness. It's just how the mind works when the world goes still. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. The quiet continues here, just as it is. There's no need to solve anything right now. There's no need to reframe or fix or resist. This isn't a place for answers. This is a place for rest, for perspective, for understanding what's happening, gently, calmly, so that sleep can arrive without being summoned. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are not alone in this particular ache. Tonight, we'll explore why the quiet can feel like pressure, why being single can feel like a deficit even when it isn't, and why your thoughts might feel more honest at night, even when they aren't. I'm glad you're here. Darkness doesn't just dim the room. It shifts everything. The temperature dips ever so slightly. Shadows soften the edges of your walls, and the sounds of the world pull back like a tide. There are no horns, no footsteps, no new notifications to respond to. In their absence, something else arrives. Not chaos, not noise, but weight. A kind of emotional heaviness that doesn't always feel loud, just present, just real. And that's when the thoughts come back. Not necessarily new ones, just the ones you've already whispered before. the ones that wait until you're lying still and the world has stopped asking for your attention. You might feel it as a quiet ache. You might hear it as a single question. You might not have the words for it at all, only a sense that something's pressing down on your chest, even if there's nothing there. The reason it feels heavier now isn't because something inside you broke open. It's because your brain has changed gears. And this shift, as subtle as it may feel, is deeply biological. During the day, your body and brain are supported by stress-regulating hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These aren't just for big emotions or emergencies. They're part of the natural daytime rhythm that keeps you alert, focused, and buffered from emotional overload. Your nervous system is primed for doing, for responding, for balancing input from the outside world. But once the evening settles in, those hormones begin to dip. Your body prepares for sleep, your systems downshift. And with that soft hormonal retreat, emotional regulation becomes more fragile. That means a small worry that might have passed unnoticed at 3 p.m. can hit like a flood at 11 p.m. The same thought, the same story, just a different system running the show. Scientists call this your circadian low point, a phase of your 24-hour rhythm when mood regulation tends to dip and emotional reactivity can increase. You're more sensitive. Your thoughts feel heavier, they ring louder. And this isn't a flaw in your personality, it's a feature of your physiology. And then there's the silence. At night, the world withdraws its signals. No more co-workers reminding you of the hour, no text distracting you, no clinking of dishes from the next room. Without those sensory anchors, your brain turns inward. The default mode network, a brain system involved in memory, imagination, and self-reflection, becomes more active. And when that system turns on during emotionally charged states like loneliness, it doesn't just reflect, it loops, it repeats, it scans for meaning. That's why, even if nothing has changed from the afternoon to now, a thought like, "I'm still single," doesn't land the same way after dark. It's no longer a status update. It's a story. And your brain, tired and slightly unregulated, starts filling in the meaning. That must mean something about me, about my worth, about what other people have that I don't. This is why the same emotional thoughts that floated by unnoticed in the morning now feel like anchors. Night doesn't create them. It just clears the air around them, so they become harder to ignore. And it's not just emotional, it's perceptual. When sensory input fades, internal signals grow louder. A study on sensory deprivation and emotional salience shows that in low stimulation environments, people are more attuned to their own feelings, even if those feelings aren't new. The room didn't change, but your access to yourself did. There's a kind of honesty that night tries to sell us. It says, "This is the real version of how you feel. This is the truth you've been avoiding." But that's not quite right. What's real is the shift in how strongly you feel it. The volume went up, not the accuracy. So if the thought feels unbearable right now, that doesn't mean it will be in the morning. That doesn't mean it's wrong or meaningless. But it also doesn't mean it deserves the power it's claiming. This feeling you're holding tonight is situationally magnified. That's not weakness. That's wiring. Your mind is responding to a quieter world, and in that quiet, it's easier to hear echoes. But just because they're louder doesn't mean they're true. The body is winding down, the brain is turning inward, and emotions, like shadows, seem longer when the light is low. You are still the same person who walked through your day. You are simply standing in a different kind of light. There's something that happens when the day ends, not just to the world outside, but to the world inside you. The outward movement, the forward momentum, begins to slow. Tasks fade. Notifications stop. No one's waiting for a response. The distractions thin out until all that's left is the hush. And with that hush, something subtle begins to happen in the brain. The doing stops. The interpreting begins. During daylight, your brain is in what scientists sometimes call task-positive mode. This means your mental energy is directed outward, toward things that need attention, toward goals that need action, toward people and processes that require input. You're moving from one thing to another, making breakfast, answering emails, finishing errands. That outward motion creates a natural buffer between you and your inner world. It's not that feelings don't exist, they're just layered beneath the noise of necessity. But at night, as the to-do list closes and the phone dims, that external orientation begins to dissolve. And when it does, something else takes its place. The default mode network, the system in your brain responsible for self-reflection, memory, and narrative building, starts to light up. This shift isn't dangerous or even unusual. It's completely natural. But when you're alone, and especially when you're feeling vulnerable, that shift can feel like a sudden turn inward, one that you didn't consciously choose. The brain moves from, "What do I need to do?" to "What does this all mean?" And when meaning-making begins in the absence of outside signals, the results can feel more like judgment than insight. A quiet room becomes a courtroom. A thought becomes a verdict. "I'm alone tonight," quietly morphs into, "I must be unlovable," or "I must have done something wrong," or "This is where I failed." But these aren't conclusions you came to after calm reflection. They're emotional echoes generated during a shift in mental processing, a moment when the brain, fatigued and seeking closure, begins to tell stories to make sense of silence. This is how nighttime thoughts often fool us. They don't feel like questions. They feel like facts. Not because they're rooted in new evidence, but because the brain is no longer filtering them through the same rational systems it had access to earlier in the day. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and regulation, is winding down. And the emotional brain, the amygdala, the memory centers, the sensitivity circuits, is now operating without its usual filters. So the same simple observation, "I didn't talk to anyone tonight," which may have seemed neutral during lunch, now carries emotional gravity. It becomes, "People don't want to talk to me," or "There's something wrong with how I connect." The brain isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to understand the moment. But understanding is more fragile at night. It leans harder on memory, on past emotion, on imagined futures. The narrative it builds isn't always kind, not because it's telling the truth, but because it's telling a story with the lights off. And the stories we tell in the dark often exaggerate contrast. Singlehood becomes solitude. Solitude becomes loneliness. Loneliness becomes failure. It's a progression that makes sense when your nervous system is lowered, your emotional access is heightened, and your environment isn't offering any evidence to the contrary. This is why one of the softest things you can do for yourself at night isn't to push the story away, but to gently recognize that a shift has occurred. Your brain has entered the interpretive mode. It is painting meaning across the canvas of your day, sometimes thoughtfully, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with too much color in places that need none. You don't need to erase the story. You only need to notice that it is a story. Meaning making is not a flaw, it's a function. The brain will always search for a why. But just because it searches at night doesn't mean what it finds is permanent. What feels like truth now may dissolve in the daylight. And that's not denial, that's perspective. So if the silence feels sharper tonight, if your singlehood feels more like a wound than a phase, if you're hearing old doubts replay with new clarity, it might just be the sound of the brain shifting from action into narrative. And like any story told in the dark, it reads differently once the light returns. There is a moment, often subtle, when the quiet outside starts to echo inward. You may not notice it at first. You've turned off the lights. Your body is stilled. The world seems softer. But somewhere beneath that softness, something sharp stirs. Not with anger or volume, but with precision. A thought, or a question, or maybe just a sensation, a vague unease. And then it lands. There must be something wrong with me. It's not screamed. It doesn't need to be. It arrives as a whisper with the weight of a certainty. No proof, no logic, just a deeply familiar feeling that's hard to shake and harder still to argue with. This is the nighttime critic, not the loud, dramatic voice of panic, but the quieter one that speaks just when the world around you has stopped. And because it speaks in silence, it feels more believable. There is science behind why this happens. As your body winds down for sleep, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, reasoning part of your brain, begins to dim its activity. This part of the brain is responsible for impulse control, long-term planning, and filtering emotional responses. During the day, it helps keep everything in balance. But by late evening, especially when you're tired or emotionally low, its influence fades. At the same time, other parts of your brain become more dominant, most notably the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotional reactions, especially fear and threat. With your emotional system now operating without its usual filters, you're more likely to experience intense emotions and less likely to challenge them. So when the thought, "I'm the problem," appears, it doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like a diagnosis. And because it arrives in the middle of stillness, when there are no conversations happening, no feedback from others, no distractions from work or life or sound, it feels like it must be coming from somewhere deep, somewhere true. But it's not. Not in the way it feels. What you're experiencing is something psychologists call emotional reasoning. It's the tendency to assume that because something feels true, it must be true. And at night, with your brain in this more vulnerable state, that reasoning becomes sticky. The thought repeats, it latches on, it grows. You think, there must be something wrong with me because I'm alone. But the reality might be, I'm alone right now, and that's hard. But it doesn't mean I'm broken. The critic doesn't see that distinction. It collapses emotion and identity into a single claim. You feel sad, so you must be flawed. You feel lonely, so you must be failing. And if you've been single for a long time, or if you've had recent rejection, or if people around you seem to be coupling off, those thoughts don't just echo. They collect evidence. They build a case. The nighttime critic isn't interested in nuance. It's just trying to protect you from uncertainty by offering a clean answer, even if that answer is cruel. But the absence of a relationship is not the presence of a defect. Being alone at night doesn't prove you're unworthy. It simply reflects a set of circumstances, amplified by silence, filtered through a tired emotional system, and handed to you as a conclusion. You are not broken. You are simply tired, quiet, and caught in a moment when your brain's filter has gone offline. One of the most gentle things you can do is to name this for what it is. Not a truth, not even a belief, just a symptom of being human at night. Imagine the critic not as a judge, but as a confused part of you trying to make sense of silence. Not malicious, just mistaken. You don't have to argue. You don't have to reframe. You don't even have to fix it. Just notice. Ah, that voice again. The one that only shows up when the house is this quiet. And then you can let it pass, like the sound of the fridge kicking on, or a distant car moving down the street. A noise, not a narrative. Your worth doesn't change with the hour. Your lovability doesn't vanish after dark. You are still who you were at midday, even if the voice that visits you now doesn't remember that. The quiet allows this critic to speak, but the quiet can also allow you to observe it, gently, without believing everything it says. There's a strange thing that happens when the world goes quiet. The mind begins to look sideways, not forward, not inward, but across, to other people, to other lives, to what they have or seem to have. And in the late hours, that sideways glance doesn't feel like curiosity. It feels like measurement. Measurement without context, without kindness. Your friend just posted a photo, their face softly lit by candlelight, two glasses visible at the edge of the frame. A caption about a perfect night, a favorite person. You scroll past it slowly. You don't want to feel anything, but your stomach shifts anyway. The thought arrives without effort. I'm missing that. And then, everyone else has someone. Why don't I? This isn't a failure of character. It's not proof that you're bitter or jealous or weak. It's a function of the brain. In particular, a brain that has entered what researchers call a low stimulation state, a quiet environment without external distractions, where attention naturally shifts inward or to emotionally relevant cues. In that state, we become more sensitive to contrast. And when the contrast involves connection, love, or intimacy, the gap between what others seem to have and what we currently feel opens wide. This is especially true at night, when we're more prone to making upward social comparisons, looking at people we think are better off and using them as a mirror. In daylight, we can push back against that instinct with logic, with schedules, with physical motion. But at night, our ability to reframe is worn thin by fatigue, and our access to other reference points has faded. So we compare. We compare relationships. We compare timelines. We compare the silence in our room to the sound of someone else's laughter on a story, and none of it is accurate. But all of it feels true. Even our memories get involved. When we're lonely, the brain becomes more likely to recall moments of connection, not to comfort us, but as part of a pattern of contrast. You might remember an old partner holding your hand on a winter walk, a conversation on a couch, a trip. Not because those were your best moments, but because they stand in opposition to the quiet you're in now. This pattern, comparing current absence to remembered or imagined presence, becomes especially powerful during rest states. The default mode network, active during moments of introspection, naturally pulls together emotional cues and past experiences. And in people experiencing loneliness, it tends to bias toward what's missing. So the experience becomes layered. You're not just feeling your own evening, you're feeling the weight of a dozen imagined evenings, friends at dinner, partners in bed, someone somewhere being kissed while you boil water for tea. Even benign signals become proof. A neighbor's laugh, two sets of footsteps on the sidewalk. You hear them, and your brain translates them. They're loved. I'm alone. But here's the truth. Contrast is not always clarity. The image you're comparing yourself to is incomplete. Social media is curated. Memories are softened. You do not see the full story, only the parts your brain selects as evidence of what you lack. And even that comparison, even if it were accurate, would still be tilted by time. What feels like connection now might be loneliness in disguise for someone else. And what feels like lack tonight might be exactly the kind of space your future self will be thankful for. At night, the brain wants to resolve the discomfort of aloneness. One of the fastest ways it does that is by imagining the better version, the coupled version, the socially integrated version, and holding it up against your current state. But that's not insight. That's emotional survival instinct. It's okay to notice the contrast, but you don't have to believe it means you're less, or late, or wrong. Let the comparisons be what they are. Flickers in a quiet hour. They don't need answers. They don't define your worth. They are echoes of your own longing, refracted through a tired and overstimulated system. No one's life is as neat as the image you're seeing. No one's relationship is as soothing as the caption implies. And no one escapes these moments of measurement, not even the people whose posts you just scrolled past. So if the hour feels sharp, if the contrast feels cruel, let that awareness be softened by this truth. What you're seeing is a fragment, and what you're feeling is temporary. You are not the sum of what others seem to have. You are the full expression of a moment in your own journey. And right now, it's just one moment. One quiet hour, nothing more. There's a clock we carry inside us. Not a real one, but something quieter. Something shaped by years of stories, family expectations, social cues, movies, traditions, holidays. By the time we're in our 20s or 30s, it's already ticking. And at night, especially when we're single, that ticking gets louder. You lie there, surrounded by stillness, and a voice whispers, "You should be further along by now. You should have found someone already. You're late." Late to what exactly? The question barely gets asked, because the feeling has already taken over. It's not about logic. It's about perception. It's about the invisible timeline you've been measuring yourself against since you were young, even if you never agreed to it. There's an emotional pain that comes not from loneliness itself, but from feeling like you've missed a deadline, a milestone, a chapter everyone else seems to have turned. And night, with its silence and its lack of distraction, is when that story begins to loop. This isn't just cultural, it's neurological. The brain loves patterns. It wants life to move in understandable sequences. When your life deviates from the patterns you've absorbed, finish school, meet someone, settle down, start a family, it doesn't just confuse the world around you, it confuses you. So the brain tries to explain the deviation, and too often, it blames you for it. I'm alone because I failed at something. I must have done something wrong. Everyone else figured it out but me. That framing might feel like truth in the quiet of night, but it's not. It's a byproduct of what psychologists call narrative discrepancy, the gap between the story you believed your life would follow and the one you're currently living. And the wider that gap feels, the more pain the brain interprets. What's tricky is that these timelines were rarely chosen freely. Many of them were absorbed in subtle, even invisible ways. From the age people in your family got married, from the movies where love arrives by 30, from holiday gatherings where questions like, "So are you seeing anyone yet?" don't feel innocent. They feel like reminders. And at night, you're not just confronting your current relationship status, you're confronting your entire imagined timeline. The family you thought you'd have, the trips you thought you'd take as a couple, the dinners, the plans, the long-term goals. Your brain interprets their absence not just as a delay, but as a loss of the expected story. But let's pause here, because not all progress follows linear steps, and not all growth is visible in milestones. There are people who met someone at 23, married at 25, and felt alone in that relationship by 28. There are people who spent their 30s traveling solo, healing, figuring out who they were, and found love in ways that felt more real than anything they'd rushed into before. But you don't see that at night. You don't feel the nuance, you feel the gap. So let's name the myth of falling behind, the belief that there's a schedule, and that if you've missed a step, you've failed. In truth, there is no universal timeline, no correct path, no real behind. Only the pacing of your own life, shaped by your experiences, your circumstances, your inner work. And that pacing can't be compared. At night, it's easy to forget that. It's easy to believe you're out of sync with everyone else, that you've missed your moment. But nothing has been missed. Nothing is over. The life you imagined might look different from the life you're in. That's allowed. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're living something real, something unfolding in its own time. Maybe this isn't the chapter you thought you'd be in, but that doesn't make it less worthy, less valid, less yours. Growth is not always visible from the outside. Milestones don't always arrive on cue. And the presence of someone else isn't the only marker of a meaningful life. If tonight you're grieving a timeline you didn't meet, that grief is valid. It's part of letting go. But don't let it convince you that you're late or lost. You're on time for your own unfolding. And even in this quiet, even in this pause, something inside you is moving forward. You are not behind. You are becoming. There's a moment at night, maybe after you've brushed your teeth, or turned off the final light, or slid beneath the weight of your blanket, when the air feels different, not colder necessarily, just emptier. There's no sound from another room, no distant voice, no shared movement, no exhale you can match your own breath to. You're not just alone, you feel alone. And without meaning to, your brain labels that experience as something worse. Loneliness, maybe even rejection. A feeling that says, something is missing, and maybe I'm the reason. But let's pause and gently untangle something here, because the difference matters. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. It just isn't. Solitude is a state, a physical condition. It's simply the fact of being on your own. You can be in solitude and feel peaceful. You can be in solitude and feel full. You can even be in solitude and feel connected to your thoughts, to nature, to yourself. Loneliness, on the other hand, is emotional. It's not defined by who is or isn't physically present. It's defined by whether your need for connection feels unmet. And here's the trick of the night. The brain often mislabels solitude as loneliness, especially when we're tired, especially when we're single, especially when there's nothing left to do but notice. It happens because the brain is wired to respond to absence, particularly social absence, as a kind of alert. From an evolutionary standpoint, isolation used to be dangerous. To be alone at night meant you were unprotected, vulnerable, excluded from the safety of the group. Even today, in our apartments and bedrooms and safe homes, that ancient signal still flickers. It says, something's not right, but it is right. You're safe. The doors are locked. The lights are low. The world isn't rejecting you. It's just quiet. Still, your nervous system doesn't know that at first. It scans. It searches. It interprets that silence as loss, as danger, as rejection. And that's how solitude becomes misread as loneliness. You might feel it as a kind of pressure in your chest, as restlessness, as the question, why isn't anyone here? And the brain, trying to solve for that discomfort, fills in the blanks. No one's here, so maybe I'm not worth showing up for. Maybe I'm alone because I'm not enough. That isn't truth. That's pattern recognition gone off script. When the body encounters silence, the brain wants to assign it meaning. It wants to protect you. But in doing so, it often mistakes absence of noise for absence of love. And those are not the same. There's a visual that might help here. Imagine your nervous system like a lake after a storm. At first, the surface is choppy. The wind is still. The sky still flickers. But over time, as the winds die down and the air settles, the water grows still. The body, too, needs time to realize it's not under threat, that the quiet isn't ominous. It's just quiet. Solitude can feel harsh at first, especially if you're not used to it. Especially if past experiences taught you that silence meant punishment or neglect. But if you give it time, if you don't force it to feel like something else, solitude often reveals itself to be neutral, sometimes even nourishing. You're allowed to be alone without it being a statement about your worth. You're allowed to sit in silence without assuming its judgment. You're allowed to feel the space around you and not fill it with blame. This moment, this hour, this night may be full of absence. But absence is not always loneliness. Sometimes it's just a pause. Sometimes it's just the body resting. Sometimes it's the nervous system uncoiling after a long day of alertness. And when that shift begins, when the stillness moves from sharp to soft, that's when solitude starts to show its true nature. It doesn't demand anything. It doesn't prove anything. It just offers space. So if tonight you're lying in that space wondering what it says about you, maybe it says nothing at all. Maybe it's just quiet. And maybe that quiet is where something kind begins again. There's a certain thought that doesn't always speak in words. It speaks in ache, in tightness, in a sinking feeling that creeps in somewhere around 2:30 a.m. Just as you thought sleep might be on its way, you've already replayed the day. You've scrolled for longer than you meant to. You've stared at the ceiling. You've turned your pillow over. And just as you start to drift, it catches you. If I were lovable, I wouldn't be alone right now. It doesn't arrive like a scream. It arrives like a slow unraveling. It doesn't sound dramatic. It sounds reasonable, logical even. And that's what makes it so hard to dismiss. Because you're not just lonely, you're trying to explain your loneliness. And in the dark, with nothing to counter it, this becomes the explanation that sticks. I am alone because I am unlovable. But here's the quiet truth. That thought doesn't come from clarity. It comes from fatigue, from negativity bias, from the way the brain tilts after hours of emotional processing with no external feedback to stabilize it. Let's break this down gently. The human brain has a well-documented tendency to give more weight to negative experiences and interpretations, especially in moments of stress or uncertainty. This is known as the negativity bias. It evolved to help us survive, to alert us to threats, to make us cautious. But in modern life, and especially at night, that same bias turns inward. It takes a moment of vulnerability and draws the harshest possible conclusion. You're not in danger, but your brain is acting like you are. And when your nervous system senses distress without a clear cause, it often lands on shame as the explanation. Why shame? Because shame feels like control. If you are the reason you're alone, then at least the world makes sense. At least there's a cause. At least it's not chaos. But that control comes at a cost. And the cost is you believing that your current circumstance, this moment of singleness, this season of solitude, is the result of a fundamental flaw in who you are. That's not truth. That's a coping mechanism that's turned against you. Because lovable isn't a category you fall into or out of. It's not a switch. It's not a trait that you lose because one person didn't stay, or because a relationship didn't last, or because tonight no one is lying beside you. Lovable isn't something you earn by being chosen. You were lovable before they left. You were lovable before the silence. You are lovable even now, when the night is quiet and your chest is heavy and your brain is trying to convince you otherwise. This doesn't mean the pain isn't real. It is. It's real to miss someone, or to miss the idea of someone. It's real to wish the bed weren't empty, to wish your name was being spoken softly, to long for warmth that doesn't come from your own blanket. But pain and proof are not the same. You can hurt and still be whole. You can ache and still be worthy. You can feel completely alone and still be someone a future version of you will be grateful to have become. That voice that whispers, "If I were lovable," isn't offering insight. It's offering protection. Flawed, tender protection. It's trying to shield you from uncertainty by giving you a clean and cruel answer. But you don't have to accept it. You can say instead, "This hurts, but hurt isn't proof." You can say, "This silence is heavy, but it doesn't mean I've failed." You can say, "My worth doesn't shrink in the dark." And if none of those things feel believable right now, that's okay too. You don't have to fight the thought. You don't have to disprove it. You only have to notice where it came from, not from your truth, but from your tiredness. The thought doesn't define you. It just passed through a quiet room. That's all. Let it keep going. Let yourself stay. You are not unlovable. You are simply awake and human and hoping. In a world where love comes not just from others, but from what you learn to offer back to yourself when no one else is watching. And tonight, that begins with not believing everything the silence says. If you've ever felt that a quiet night alone somehow confirms that you're unwanted, that no text, no call, no touch means something about your worth, you're not being irrational. You're being human. Beneath the quiet of the night, beneath the stillness of your routine, is a system wired to care deeply about one thing: belonging. From the earliest moments of life, our nervous system is tuned to attachment. Infants cry not just out of discomfort, but because their survival depends on being seen, held, fed, soothed. That need never leaves us. It simply evolves. The longing to belong becomes the longing to be chosen, to be understood, to be safe in connection. And when those needs go unmet, especially when we're vulnerable, tired, or emotionally unanchored, the brain registers it as threat. This is why rejection sensitivity feels especially strong at night. It's not that you've been rejected. It's that your brain is operating without the usual signals that help it feel connected. During the day, small social interactions, eye contact, conversation, a coworker's nod, a meme from a friend, give your system microdoses of reassurance. I exist in someone else's world. But at night, those signals go quiet. Not because anyone's excluding you, but because everyone's winding down. Still, your brain doesn't know the difference between quiet and exclusion. It just registers absence. And in absence, it assumes risk. You start to wonder, why hasn't anyone reached out? Did I say something wrong? Is everyone connecting without me? Did I miss my chance? This pattern isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Studies show that the same brain regions activated by physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex, are activated when we experience social exclusion or even imagine being rejected. That's right. You don't have to be actively rejected for your brain to process the pain as if you were. So the sting you feel when you see a friend's group photo without you, the ache when no one texts goodnight, the worry that your singleness is visible to everyone, that's your brain trying to protect you by alerting you to the possibility of disconnection. But protection isn't always accuracy. At night, tiredness amplifies the alarm. Your emotional regulation is lower. Your ability to filter fear from fact is reduced. And so even the faintest whiff of social distance becomes a declaration. They don't want me. Now add singleness into the mix. It's not just that you're without a partner. It's that you're without the default source of relational confirmation. No one is obligated to check in. No one's rhythm is synced to yours. Without that built-in mirror, it becomes easier for the mind to misread solitude as exclusion. And rejection sensitivity doesn't show up the same way for everyone. For some, it sounds like, I'm unworthy. For others, it's, I missed my window. A woman in her 30s might lie awake thinking, everyone I know is married. I must have done something wrong. A man in his 40s might scroll in silence and think, no one wants someone like me. I've already faded. These narratives differ, but their roots are shared. The pain of disconnection, compounded by the mind's habit of turning uncertainty into self-blame. But it's important to remember, feeling rejected is not the same as being rejected. The emotional system is like a radar. It scans for threats, but it doesn't always detect truth. Sometimes it misfires. Sometimes it overcorrects. Sometimes it responds to silence with panic, simply because silence feels unfamiliar. So what can we do in these moments? First, we can name it. This is rejection sensitivity. It's not necessarily reality. Second, we can locate the source. I'm tired. It's late. My brain is interpreting absence as danger. Third, we can offer context. No one is reaching out, not because I'm unwanted, but because everyone's offline, just like me. This kind of mental reframing doesn't erase the ache, but it softens it. It reminds you that the hurt is a signal, not a sentence. That you don't need to make meaning out of every unanswered text. That you're allowed to sit in the quiet without deciding what it says about you. Rejection sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a feature of a heart that wants to belong. A body that evolved to survive in connection. But in modern life, and especially in the isolation of a late night, that same system needs help interpreting its signals. So tonight, if the silence feels pointed, if the lack of touch feels like verdict, if you're lying in bed thinking, if someone wanted me, they'd be here, pause and tell yourself the gentler truth. This pain is part of how I was built, but it's not proof of what I am. You are not unchosen. You are not invisible. You are just awake in a quiet hour, with a brain that's trying, maybe too hard, to make sense of an empty room. That room does not define your value. It only holds space for your softness, and maybe, with time, for your healing too. It often starts subtly. You're lying there in the dark, maybe still scrolling, maybe just staring at the ceiling. Your body's quiet, your surroundings are still, and your brain does what it's been trained to do when it doesn't have feedback from the outside world. It turns inward, and that's when it begins. Not loudly, not cruelly at first, just questions. Was I too quiet? Did I come off needy? Was it something I said? Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe this is my fault. This is the voice of self-blame. And at night, it doesn't ask for permission before it speaks. It simply arrives, wearing the costume of accountability, whispering that your solitude must be the result of your own failures. Because if it wasn't, then what other explanation could there be? The brain doesn't like open loops. It craves cause and effect. If you're single, if you feel lonely, if you're not waking up to a good morning text, then surely it reasons there must be a reason. And when no external one is obvious, it turns its gaze inward and begins collecting evidence. And it always finds some. That one message you never replied to. That moment when you were distant, distracted, awkward. The years you didn't try hard enough. Or maybe tried too hard. And suddenly, your brain has built a case. A story with you at the center, not as the protagonist, but as the saboteur. Not as someone hurting, but as someone deserving the hurt. This is not truth. This is pattern-seeking behavior distorted by solitude and exhaustion. Psychologists call this internal attribution bias, the tendency to attribute negative outcomes to flaws within ourselves, especially when lacking clear external explanations. And it becomes particularly powerful when we're emotionally low, physically tired, or lacking external validation. At night, you have no one to reassure you, no one to contradict the harsh stories you're telling yourself. You're not bouncing thoughts off a friend. You're not getting laughter or encouragement in real time. You're inside a one-person echo chamber, and the echoes get darker the longer they bounce. This is why the mind replays conversations on loop at night. Why it scans through years of relationships, even casual ones, and picks apart each one like a forensic analysis. It's not trying to harm you, it's trying to understand. But in the absence of context, the explanations become cruel. And the cruelty often disguises itself as maturity. The voice says, "I'm just holding myself accountable." It says, "It's good to reflect on your mistakes." It says, "Maybe this is what I deserve." But there is a difference between reflection and rumination, between growth and guilt. And what you're experiencing in these hours, what so many of us experience, is not productive insight. It's emotional erosion, a quiet unraveling of self-worth that feels like honesty, but is actually imbalance. Because the brain doesn't just review the evidence of past pain, it selects for it. Negativity bias ensures that painful memories stand out more vividly, and in times of self-doubt, we reach for those memories as proof of our unworthiness. Happy moments? We dismiss them as luck or exceptions. Kindnesses we've shown, we forget. Times we were loved well, we assume they were mistakes. And so the loop continues. I feel alone implies I must have done something implies. Here's what I did implies. That's why I'm here implies I feel alone. Round and round. The way out isn't through arguing with the thoughts. You won't win an internal trial against yourself in the middle of the night. The way out is to notice what's happening, to name the loop, and to gently step outside of it. You might say, "This is my brain trying to protect me from confusion." You might say, "This pain doesn't mean I did something wrong." You might even say nothing at all and just breathe, letting the next thought come and go without engaging. Self-blame at night is a common experience, but it is not a trustworthy narrator. It speaks in the voice of your fear, not your truth. Remember this: The presence of solitude is not the absence of value. The quiet around you is not an accusation. And the thoughts you're having tonight do not define who you are. They define how tired you are, how human you are, and how deeply you care about connection. You are not failing at being loved. You are simply feeling the weight of being human in the dark, without someone else's voice to anchor you. That's hard, but it's not your fault, and it will pass. There is a moment in the night when your body wants to let go. Your breathing slows. The lights are off. There's no more to do, no one to reply to, nowhere to be. The nervous system, sensing the absence of stimulation, begins to shift. What it's shifting toward is something you felt before, maybe without naming it. Stillness. Not just physical stillness, but neurological stillness. This shift is natural. It's built into your biology. Your autonomic nervous system is designed to guide you through two primary modes. The sympathetic, which fuels action, stress, and alertness, and the parasympathetic, which governs rest, digestion, healing, and quiet. At night, your body attempts to move into this parasympathetic state, often called rest and digest mode. Heart rate drops. Breathing deepens. Muscles loosen. The outside world withdraws, and the inside world starts to glow a little brighter. But here's the paradox. The process meant to bring calm often brings discomfort first. Because when you're used to constant input, noise, conversation, movement, validation, the sudden absence of stimulation doesn't feel like peace. It feels like something's wrong. The body begins to scan the silence. The mind starts to search. The stillness, instead of being restful, feels foreign. It feels like a test. And if you're single, that test feels even sharper. There's no partner to mirror your shift. No other person's breath to attune to. No shared conversation to bridge the gap between wakefulness and sleep. Without external cues of safety, your nervous system might not feel reassured, at least not right away. It begins to interpret the lack of presence as potential threat, even if logically you know you're safe. This is the nervous system's threat assessment loop. And in moments of solitude, especially at night, it can misfire. You may feel a knot in your stomach, a flutter of unease in your chest. Not because anything is wrong, but because the body has entered unfamiliar territory, a quiet it doesn't yet trust. It's easy to mistake this sensation for anxiety, or for proof that being alone is bad for you. But often, what you're experiencing is the body transitioning out of hypervigilance. And that transition can be uncomfortable before it becomes soothing. Imagine a spinning top. It doesn't stop all at once. It wobbles. It shifts. It struggles to stay in motion before it yields. Your nervous system does the same. All day, it's been spinning, responding, adapting, protecting. And now, in the hush of your room, it starts to slow. That slowing is unfamiliar. It can feel like loss. It can feel like sadness. But often, it's simply the body's way of returning to baseline. If you've gone through stress recently, a breakup, a long season of loneliness, or even just a chaotic day, this shift can feel even more jarring. A hyperactive system doesn't uncoil gently. It startles. It shakes a little before it rests. This is not failure. It's a sign that your system is trying to recover. Stillness also removes external feedback loops. During the day, other people's expressions, tone of voice, eye contact, even casual texts, all provide micro adjustments to your emotional state. Without those, your internal system has to regulate itself. It's like learning to balance without training wheels. It can feel wobbly, but with time, it strengthens. And this strength is real. The ability to feel unsettled by stillness and not run from it, to stay, to breathe, to soften, is a deep skill, a slow courage. It doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it leads to something powerful, self-trust. Eventually, the body learns. The quiet is not dangerous. It's just new. It's just full of space. And space doesn't have to be filled to be safe. When you're single, you may experience this shift more vividly. Without another body to sync with, you learn to become your own source of co-regulation. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it does mean you're learning something essential. How to downshift, gently, without needing anyone else to hold the brakes. If tonight the stillness feels too sharp, don't force calm. Just notice. Just allow your system to recognize that nothing is wrong, that the room is still, that your heart is safe, that sleep will come, not because you demand it, but because your body is wise and wants to rest. You are not failing if it takes time to settle. You are learning to meet yourself in quiet. And in that meeting, something stronger than calm may emerge. Peace without performance. Safety without signal. Stillness that doesn't ask for anything, only that you stay a while. When the lights go out and the world around you finally stops speaking, something strange happens. You begin to hear yourself. Not your voice, not your breath, but the thoughts that swirl in quiet repetition, circling, reflecting, repeating, as if searching for resolution they never quite reach. These are the internal loops, and when you're alone at night, they can become echo chambers. Quiet on the outside, but deafening within. You know the ones. Why didn't they stay? Did I miss my chance? What if it's always like this? What's wrong with me? The same handful of questions, the same themes, playing again and again like a song stuck just before the final note. You don't invite them. You don't even always notice them start. But there they are, persistent, soft-spoken, and insistent that you listen. Why does this happen? It begins with silence. During the day, your thoughts are constantly interrupted. A conversation here, an email there, a notification buzzing through your pocket. The external world creates rhythm, disruptions that keep inner patterns from looping too tightly. But at night, the external rhythm fades. There's nothing to break the cycle. So once a thought begins, it has space to echo. This is particularly pronounced when you're alone. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because there's no second voice to break the pattern. No, that's not true from a partner. No, hey, let's go for a walk from a friend. The loop continues uninterrupted until it feels like a truth rather than a pattern. And that's what makes it so potent. In solitude, repetition becomes conviction. The brain's default mode network, which becomes more active during rest and introspection, is a system designed to process memories, imagine futures, and explore identity. But under stress, particularly social or emotional stress, it becomes a kind of closed system. It draws from past pain. It builds hypothetical futures from worst-case scenarios. It spirals. This is why a single thought like, "I'm still single," doesn't stay as just an observation. It becomes the seed for a full monologue. "I'm still single" implies that must mean something, implies I'm probably unlovable, implies I've probably always been this way, implies no one's ever really known me, implies what if no one ever does. All from a single starting point. And when the room is quiet and the hour is late, you don't always notice that you've followed the spiral. You don't see how far you've traveled. You only feel the weight of where you've landed. It's important to remember, this is not clarity. It's cognitive looping. And it's not just emotional, it's neurological. When you're tired or emotionally raw, your brain's ability to regulate and redirect thought is diminished. That means patterns that would normally be disrupted just continue. This is also why the same thoughts appear night after night. It's not that they're truer in the dark. It's that the conditions for repetition are consistent. Silence, solitude, and a mind that's been holding too much without release. You might think, if I keep thinking this every night, it must be true. But repetition doesn't equal truth. Repetition equals unresolved processing. And the echo chamber is not proof of something wrong with you. It's a side effect of being unguarded, unmirrored, and uninterrupted. So what do? You don't fight the thoughts. That usually tightens the loop. You don't force yourself to think positively. That often feels hollow. What you do is create a gentle wedge, a soft pause. You name it. This is the loop. You speak it out loud if you need to. "I've had this thought before." You remind yourself. This thought feels loud because it's night, not because it's new. Sometimes, the only thing the loop needs is a break in rhythm, a breath, a grounding sensation, a sentence that acknowledges, "This isn't me failing. This is my brain trying to process too much, too quietly." The goal isn't to silence the echo chamber. It's to remind yourself that the chamber has walls. And outside those walls, perspective still exists. Morning still comes. Conversations still happen. You still have access to clarity. It's just muffled right now by fatigue and repetition. You are not the voice inside the loop. You are the person listening. And the fact that you notice it, that you can name it, is proof that you are still here, still aware, still moving through the night towards something quieter, something softer, something closer to peace. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels pointed, measured, heavy with implications. You turn off the lights, put your phone down, settle into the hush, and the hush stares back. Not gently, not indifferently, but almost like it's waiting for you to say something, to do something, to pass something. It feels like a test of patience, a test of resilience, a test of your worth. And maybe you felt this before, lying there thinking, if I were important, someone would have reached out. If I mattered, my phone wouldn't be this quiet. If I were truly loved, I wouldn't feel this alone. These aren't rational conclusions. They're emotional equations, built from silence, tiredness, and the human need for affirmation. When no signals come from the outside world, the brain starts filling in meaning. And that meaning almost always reflects your most tender insecurities. This tendency is natural. Humans are meaning makers. When something is missing, we don't leave it blank, we fill it. And we often fill it with ourselves. So if the messages don't come, we assume we're forgettable. If no one checks in, we wonder if we're unlikable. If we don't hear, "Good night, I love you," we start to imagine we were never loved at all. But here's the gentle truth. Silence is not a verdict. It's not proof. It's not a statement of your worth. Silence is simply the absence of signal, not the presence of rejection. At night, the mind becomes hypersensitive to feedback and the lack of it. You've spent the whole day receiving input, glances, nods, notifications, noise. Your nervous system has been interpreting those cues constantly. Then suddenly, everything stops. And that stop, instead of feeling restful, feels like a void that begs for explanation. So your brain offers one. I'm not hearing anything because I'm not worth hearing from. This is where the sense of being tested sets in. You start to feel like your value is being measured by your aloneness. That if you were really lovable, desirable, connected, this moment of stillness wouldn't exist. But the stillness is not about you. It's about time. It's about cycles. It's about the natural, quiet winding down of human activity. People sleep. People turn inward. People log off. Not as a rejection of you, but as a rhythm of life. Still, the emotional system doesn't recognize that immediately, especially if you're single, especially if you've been feeling uncertain about where you fit. In the absence of contact, we crave reassurance. And when none arrives, we sometimes invent the opposite. Silence becomes interpreted as a test of how much we're wanted. And if no one passes that test by showing up, we assume we've failed. But the test isn't real. It's imagined, fabricated by a nervous system that's used to noise and doesn't quite know how to settle into quiet without creating a story around it. This is why some nights hurt more than others. Not because anything changed, but because your brain feels more raw, more expectant, more in need of proof that you're not alone, not forgotten, not unworthy. And silence offers no proof either way. That's what makes it so hard. So here's the invitation. What if silence isn't asking you to pass anything? What if it's not measuring you at all? What if it's just space, blank, neutral, waiting to be filled not with judgment, but with gentleness? You don't have to interpret the quiet. You don't have to turn it into a story. You don't have to believe it says something about who you are. Sometimes, silence just means people are resting. That the world is slowing down. That nothing is required of you right now, except stillness. There is no moral value in whether your phone lights up tonight. There is no cosmic test being administered to see if you're loved. You are loved. You are remembered. You are worthy, even when no signal is coming in to tell you so. Silence is not evidence. It's just the absence of noise. And that means you're allowed to meet it without fear, without interpretation, without apology. You don't have to pass the silence. You just have to rest inside it, knowing it means nothing about you except that you are here, and it is quiet, and both those things can be true without needing to explain anything at all. There is a window in the night that doesn't belong to evening anymore, but hasn't yet become morning, a kind of nowhere time. You check the clock. It's 3:14 a.m., maybe 3:41, maybe 4:02. And in that window, the silence no longer just surrounds you. It feels like it's inside you. This is the hardest hour. And if you've ever found yourself wide awake in it, convinced that something is deeply wrong, not just with your circumstances, but with you, know this: you are not broken. You are not alone. And there is science behind why this moment can feel so unbearable. Between 3 and 4 a.m., your body is in its circadian low point. This is the phase of your 24-hour biological rhythm, where energy, temperature, alertness, and, most critically, cortisol levels are at their absolute minimum. Cortisol isn't just a stress hormone. It also plays a key role in mood regulation, cognitive alertness, and the ability to manage emotional distress. When cortisol dips, the brain's ability to regulate strong emotions is reduced. At the same time, other systems don't go to sleep, particularly the amygdala, the part of the brain involved in detecting threat and triggering fear responses. Without the usual balance provided by higher-order reasoning and hormonal support, the amygdala essentially runs unchecked. The result? Emotion without context, fear without clarity, sadness without proportion. You may find yourself thinking, "I'm going to feel like this forever," or "I've ruined everything," or "This loneliness is proof that no one will ever choose me." These thoughts feel not just intense, they feel true. Not because they are, but because the system that usually challenges and reshapes those thoughts has gone offline for the night. You're experiencing what researchers and clinicians often refer to as nighttime cognitive distortion. The way the mind interprets emotions more catastrophically when it lacks the biological and social support it normally relies on. And when you're single, these distortions often center around connection. If someone loved me, I wouldn't be feeling this way right now. If I mattered, I'd be curled next to someone, not staring at the ceiling. But those conclusions aren't reflections of your worth. They're the mind trying to construct certainty from discomfort. And at 3:27 a.m., discomfort is the only raw material available. That doesn't make the pain imaginary. It's real. But its intensity is chemically heightened, not because something just got worse, but because your ability to balance the narrative has temporarily dimmed. This is also the hour when shame feels most convincing. Not necessarily loud, just present, like a fog that settles without asking. Your past mistakes seem sharper, your fears more rational, your future less promising. And all of it lands in the same breath as you turn over and wonder how it's possible to feel this hollow without anything happening. But something is happening. Your body is downshifting. Your emotional system is recalibrating. It doesn't feel like healing, but it is. Your brain is trying to consolidate emotion, memory, sensation. And in that process, with the lights off and no partner beside you, the emotional load can feel like too much. So what can you do? Not much. And that's okay. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to argue with the thoughts. You don't even have to make them go away. You only have to remember that this is the hour that distorts, that what feels like a conclusion is just a symptom, that what seems like a final truth is just a passing chemical wave. You are not meant to make decisions in this hour. You are not meant to assign meaning here. You are only meant to breathe, survive it, to stay soft enough to make it to the next one. Because 3:41 will eventually become 5:12, and 5:12 becomes morning. And what feels unbearable now may become background. What feels like proof of your unworthiness may feel, by daylight, like something simpler, a signal that you were hurting and awake and tired, and that your brain did what brains do when they're tired and alone. You're not wrong for feeling this, but this feeling is not your final reality. You are simply moving through the hardest hour, and soon you won't be in it anymore. When you're lying in bed and the ache feels sharpest, the silence too deep, the night too long, one thought tends to rise above all others. I'll always feel this way. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It arrives in the form of certainty. Heavy, slow, settling over everything. And once it lands, it colors every part of your internal world. You stare at the ceiling, and the thought says, "This isn't just a hard night. This is your life now." You think about past relationships, and the thought says, "They're not coming back. No one is." You glance at the clock, and the thought says, "It's always this late. It's always this quiet. And it always will be." This belief that your current emotional state will stretch forward without end is not uncommon. It's a well-documented pattern known as emotional permanence, where the brain, particularly when distressed, struggles to imagine future emotional states that differ from the present one. At night, when contrast is minimal and outside signals have faded, this distortion becomes even more convincing. During the day, your feelings exist in a larger context. You might feel sad, but then someone smiles at you. You might feel tired, but then sunlight breaks through a window. Your emotions interact with motion, with conversation, with contrast. They're fluid. They change. But at night, everything stills. There are no incoming signals to contradict the sadness. There is no visual movement to remind you that time is passing. No laughter in the next room to pull you out of your head. The present moment stretches. And when that happens, the mind starts to believe that what's happening now is what will always happen. That's the quiet trick of nighttime loneliness. It doesn't just tell you you're alone. It tells you that this aloneness is permanent. And for those who are single, this feeling can dig even deeper. It's not just that you're alone tonight. It's the fear that this night represents a pattern, a proof, a glimpse into a future where you're always on your own. If it feels this empty now, your mind says, why would it ever change? But what you're experiencing in this moment is not prophecy. It's not the voice of intuition. It's the product of emotional reasoning. The tendency to assume that because something feels intense, it must also be accurate. And the mind in emotional reasoning mode is short on nuance. It forgets how mornings feel. It forgets how connection works. It forgets that you've laughed before, felt love before, had days when the quiet didn't feel sharp. It just felt like rest. Night collapses perspective. It makes time feel small. The hours loop. The day feels far away. The future becomes unimaginable. And in that collapse, permanence sneaks in. But here's the gentle reminder. You haven't always felt this way. So it stands to reason you won't always feel this way again. What feels like forever is just a moment that hasn't been interrupted yet. Imagine this. You're holding a snow globe, and inside it, the flakes are swirling chaotically. You can't see the image at the center. All you can see is the storm. But if you let it sit, even for just a little while, the snow begins to settle. And underneath, something clearer begins to emerge. The shape of what's real. The outline of what's true. That's what happens with emotions too. Especially the heavy ones. They settle. Not because they're unimportant, but because they're temporary. Because your body, your heart, your mind, they are always moving. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when you swear you're stuck. Even when the night is so quiet that the only thing louder is your fear. You are still changing, still healing, still becoming. This feeling, however intense, is part of a cycle, not the conclusion of your story. You might not be able to see the shift right now, but it's coming. Even now, the clock is ticking forward. Even now, the chemicals in your brain are starting to ebb. Even now, the first birds are stirring somewhere outside, and the sky is preparing to change. So the next time that voice says, "You'll always feel this way," you don't have to argue. Just nod and whisper back, "Maybe, but probably not," and let that be enough. Because morning always comes, even if you don't believe it yet. When the mind is spinning and the heart feels full of questions it can't answer, sleep can seem impossibly far away. Maybe you've had those nights when your eyes are heavy, but your thoughts keep pacing. When your body aches for rest, but your emotions won't lie down beside you. And in that restless place, it's easy to assume that sleep is just another thing you can't quite reach. Another reminder that something is off. Another signal that your loneliness has tipped into something worse. But what's often forgotten in these moments is that sleep, simple, quiet, unremarkable sleep, is not just the end of an emotional storm. It's part of the cure. Because sleep isn't a passive state. It's not just a break. It's a biological reset, a system-wide recalibration that directly affects your ability to feel, to think, and to cope. During the day, your brain accumulates tension, not just from tasks or conversations, but from tiny emotional exposures, disappointment, envy, embarrassment, fear, and of course, loneliness. These experiences don't disappear. They build. They lodge themselves in neural loops, waiting for a chance to be processed. And sleep is that chance. When you finally drift off, your brain begins a highly organized sequence of restorative actions. In particular, REM sleep plays a vital role in emotional regulation. During this phase, the brain reactivates emotionally significant memories, but it does so without the flood of stress chemicals that accompanied them in waking life. In simpler terms, you dream through your pain, but without the sting. You metabolize your emotions. You neutralize the charge. This is why something that felt huge at 2 a.m. might feel strangely manageable at 8. It's not just perspective. It's biology. You slept. You sorted. You released. Your nervous system found its rhythm again. Research supports this. Studies show that people who get adequate, high-quality sleep are better able to regulate their emotions, interpret social cues more accurately, and respond to stress with more resilience. Sleep doesn't erase the pain, but it softens it. It loosens the knot. It returns your emotional responses to scale. This is especially important when you're single, when there's no one next to you whispering reminders that things will be okay. When you have to rely on your own internal system to stabilize your emotional state. Sleep becomes not just rest, but a form of self-regulation, one of the most powerful ones we have. But here's the quiet tragedy. Just when we need it most, sleep is often hardest to access. Loneliness itself can delay sleep onset. Anxiety makes it harder to relax into rest. The very thoughts you hope to soothe through sleep are the ones that keep you awake in the first place. So what can you do? Start small. Don't try to force sleep. Invite it. Don't aim to fix your feelings. Let them be background noise. Don't judge the restlessness. Normalize it. Tell yourself, I am allowed to feel this and still fall asleep. Tell yourself, I don't need to solve anything tonight. I just need to soften. Use rituals that signal safety. Dim lights, warm blankets, a quiet voice in your ears, perhaps this one. Let your body know it can downshift, that the test is over, that it is okay to let go. And remember, even partial rest has value. Even if you wake up often, even if your dreams are strange, your body still heals, your brain still sorts. The cycle is still moving. So if you're lying there thinking, I can't keep feeling like this, know this. You don't have to keep feeling like this. Not because everything will suddenly be okay, but because sleep will help you hold it differently. Because your emotions are not static. Because your mind is not broken. Because your body is quietly, patiently working to bring you back to balance, even when it feels like nothing is happening. What's too sharp now will dull. What's too loud now will soften. What's too much now will be more bearable in the morning. And when you finally do fall asleep, even if it's later than you wanted, even if it comes like a slow surrender, let that be an act of quiet defiance against the myth that you are alone in this. You're not. Your body is with you. Your breath is with you. The natural wisdom of sleep is with you. Let it take you. Let it hold you. Let the night end, not in certainty, but in surrender. There's something hauntingly convincing about the thoughts that appear in the still hours of the night. They don't arrive with urgency. They don't shout. Instead, they creep in slowly, as if they've been there all along, waiting for the noise of the world to die down so they can finally be heard. And what they say, in their quiet, unchallenged way, often feels like truth. You're behind. You're hard to love. No one is thinking about you right now. This ache means something about who you are. These thoughts don't offer evidence. They don't need to. The timing alone makes them feel sacred, as if the night itself is revealing something honest, something hidden during the day. But here's the truth. Nighttime thoughts are not more accurate. They're just louder. They echo in a space where nothing interrupts them. No conversations to balance them out. No to-do list to distract you. No facial expressions from others to remind you how they see you. At night, the brain's natural filter goes quiet. And in that quiet, emotion takes center stage. This is especially important to understand when you're navigating singleness. Because the thoughts that surface aren't just about your day, they're about your worth. and without anything to challenge them, they start to sound like facts. But they're not facts. They're distortions shaped by isolation, fatigue, and biology. Think of nighttime like a story editor, not a truth teller. During the day, you're the protagonist. You're acting, choosing, moving. You have momentum. But at night, the editor steps in. It flips back through the pages, highlights the parts you skipped, rewrites the lines you mumbled. And because the editor works alone, it lacks context. It forgets why you made certain choices. It forgets what was happening around you. It assumes errors where there were just imperfect human moments. And so you lie in bed, reviewing a version of your life that feels thinner, darker, harsher than the one you lived just hours before. This is not wisdom. This is bias processing under low light. It's what happens when your default mode network, the system in your brain responsible for introspection and memory, takes over without guidance. Studies show that when this system is overactive during low stimulation states, like late night, it often leads to rumination, distorted self-assessment, and increased feelings of shame and isolation. So what feels like insight is often just a product of imbalance. This doesn't mean your nighttime thoughts are meaningless. Sometimes they carry real feelings that deserve your attention. But feelings are not instructions. Feelings are not blueprints. Feelings, especially the ones that arrive in silence, are signals. And they need context to be understood. Night removes that context. It strips away social cues, emotional grounding, and daily contrast. It makes your current emotional state feel like your entire emotional reality. And so, the sadness you feel becomes a claim. This sadness is who I am. This ache is permanent. This thought must be true, because it's the only one I'm hearing. But you're not hearing all your thoughts, just the ones that thrive in silence, the ones that have been waiting for the lights to dim, the ones that sound like they're helping, but only echo your fears. So what can you do? You can stop treating your nighttime thoughts as sacred. You can say, gently, "You're here because it's late, not because you're right." You can remind yourself, "I don't make life decisions after midnight." You can treat the thoughts like weather, passing through, not permanent. You can remember that your morning brain will see things differently, not because you're inconsistent, but because you're allowed to feel differently when your system is rested, regulated, and reconnected with the world around you. You can stop asking your 3 a.m. self for clarity. That version of you is tired, tender, afraid. It's okay to leave them unanswered. You don't owe your nighttime thoughts a response. You only owe yourself the grace to remember. They're part of the darkness, not a source of light. And the moment the world brightens, even a little, you'll see that for what it was. Not prophecy, not wisdom, just a page in the story that doesn't get to be the ending. There's a specific heaviness that loneliness brings, not just emotional, but physical. A weighted quiet, a sense of presence in absence. It's more than just the lack of company. It's the feeling that your need for closeness is stretching out into the dark, touching nothing and being touched by no one. At night, this sensation intensifies. Loneliness doesn't just whisper, "You're alone." It insists, "You are unchosen, you are forgotten." And if you've heard that voice, especially while lying awake, especially while single, It's easy to believe that loneliness is a verdict, that it reflects something fundamental about you, that it confirms every fear you've tried to quiet. But what if that's not true? What if loneliness isn't proof of failure? What if it's just a message? Let's start with what loneliness really is, not philosophically, but neurologically. Loneliness is a deeply ingrained biological signal. It's your nervous system's way of saying, connection is needed, attention is needed. You are not meant to do this life alone. Just like hunger signals a need for food, and thirst signals a need for water, loneliness signals a need for relational nourishment. It's not inherently tragic. It's not a diagnosis. It's not shameful. It is your body and brain working together to tell you something important. But here's where things get complicated. When that signal goes unacknowledged, when you hear it and think, this means I'm broken, instead of this means I'm needing, the pain doubles. The ache doesn't just hurt, it begins to accuse. You move from I'm feeling lonely to I am unlovable, from I wish someone was here to no one ever will be. This shift is not inevitable. It's not truth. It's a misinterpretation. One made more likely by nighttime's lack of contrast and emotional regulation. You are not meant to feel ashamed of your loneliness. You are meant to listen to it. Because loneliness can contain surprising wisdom. It can tell you what kind of connection you long for. It can help you notice what has gone missing. Not just people, but routines, rituals, meaning. It can remind you of how deeply you care, how ready you are to give and receive closeness. And when you treat loneliness as a signal, not a sentence, you begin to reclaim your agency. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what might I need? You stop framing your singleness as failure and start noticing what kinds of relationships actually nourish you, not just romantically, but platonically, communally, creatively. Loneliness does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something matters to you. You long to be known, to be seen, to be held, maybe not even physically, but emotionally. That longing is not weakness. It is deeply human. And what's more, that longing is allowed to exist even in a life that is otherwise full. People often try to solve loneliness with productivity. They add more things to their days, more goals to their calendars. But loneliness doesn't want to be fixed. It wants to be acknowledged, tended to, treated as real. And that's especially important at night, when your brain wants to convert feelings into stories. If you're not careful, the loneliness becomes a false conclusion. This is who I am now. But it isn't. This is just the part of the night where your heart is speaking, where the world has gone quiet enough for your need to be heard. Not to shame you, but to keep you human. You are still worthy when you feel lonely. You are still whole. You are still becoming. Let this feeling be what it is, a reminder, a signal, a flicker of your need for connection. Not because you're broken without it, but because you're built to desire it. And if there's no one beside you tonight, let that not be the end of the story. Let it be a message delivered in the dark. You are someone who wants to love. You are someone who deserves to feel close. You are someone who notices the quiet. And that noticing is not failure. It is capacity. Let the loneliness stay, not as a punishment, but as a marker of your depth, your softness, your readiness to connect when the time is right. And until that time comes, let this be enough. You are not the absence of connection. You are the space where connection still wants to grow. We are born into a world where safety is first taught through others. In infancy, we're calmed by a parent's voice, regulated by their rhythm, the steady bounce of a walk, the soft tone of reassurance, the chest we fall asleep against. These early experiences shape our nervous system, not just emotionally, but biologically. They teach us you are safe when someone else helps you feel safe. This system never entirely disappears. As adults, we still seek what psychologists call co-regulation, the process of syncing our emotional state with another person's presence. A friend's validation, a partner's hug, a quiet "I'm here" text in the middle of a hard day. These moments don't just feel good, they tell our nervous system, you can downshift now, you are held. But when you're single, especially at night, those signals are harder to find. You may lie in bed, heart still a little fast from the day, mind a little too full. You reach for a presence that isn't there, not because you're needy, but because you're human. Your body craves a cue that it can stop scanning, that it can settle. And when no external signal arrives, a subtle panic begins. Not the kind that makes your chest seize up, but the quieter kind. A hum beneath your skin. A whisper in your chest that says, I don't feel safe yet. This is not about danger. It's about lack of confirmation. You're not in trouble, but your nervous system doesn't feel reassured. Because without co-regulation, you are now tasked with something many of us were never taught directly. Regulating your own emotional state without someone else's help. This is the silent labor of nighttime singleness. Not just enduring the quiet, but learning to feel safe in it. It's not easy. It's not intuitive. And it's not often talked about. Because feeling unsafe without being in danger is hard to name. You might just say, I feel off, or I can't relax, or why does the silence feel so loud? But what you're feeling is the weight of self-regulation, and it's real. Your nervous system is scanning the environment for cues of safety. Eye contact, familiar voice, warmth, mutual breath. And finding none, it stays alert longer than it needs to. Not because something is wrong, but because no one has told it, you're okay. So how do you soothe the system that's waiting for reassurance that may not come? You begin with recognition. You tell yourself, my body is looking for safety, not drama, not crisis, just safety, just calm. Then you offer small cues, a warm blanket, a slow breath, a sound you associate with comfort, not to trick your nervous system, but to remind it, this moment is safe, even if it's quiet, even if I'm alone. This is called self-regulation, the process of signaling safety from within, without relying on external confirmation. It is not a replacement for connection. It is not a denial of your desire for closeness. It is a bridge, a way of saying, I can carry myself through this moment, gently. And it's a skill. The more you practice it, not perfectly, but patiently, the more your body learns that it can survive these moments, that the silence doesn't have to be a threat, that your breath can be the first voice of reassurance. That your own attention is sometimes enough to begin softening the edges of your discomfort. This isn't about independence in the way the world sells it, tough and unshakable. This is about inner kindness, the kind that says, I know you're tired, I know you want someone next to you, but until they come, or even if they don't, I am here. We are here. Being single at night doesn't mean you're strong because you're alone. It means you're growing into a version of yourself that knows how to feel safety without waiting for someone else to hand it to you. That kind of strength is slow. It's soft. It's built in hours just like this one. So if tonight feels a little uneasy, not because something is wrong, but because no one has said it's right, let me say it now. You are safe. You are allowed to rest. You are enough to reassure your own heart, even if it still longs for another one beside it. And this quiet moment, without answers, without company, without a single message lighting up your phone, might be the moment you discover that your own presence was a kind of safety all along. At a certain point in the early morning, maybe without realizing it, something begins to shift. A faint change in the air, a different hue on the wall, the distant sound of life beginning again, a neighbor's door, a car engine, birdsong threading itself into the stillness. You may not even be fully awake, but already, something in you starts to reorient. The night is ending, and with it, a gentle truth returns. Perspective was never gone. It was just out of reach. It's a strange thing, how differently the world looks depending on the hour. What seemed like proof at 3 a.m. now feels more like a passing thought. The loop that played endlessly in your head loses its volume. The ache is still there, maybe, but it no longer demands answers. And the story you were so sure of, this is who I am, this is what I'll always feel, starts to loosen its grip. This is the quiet gift of morning. It doesn't erase the night, but it puts it back in context. Because night distorts. It narrows your lens. It amplifies emotion. It strips away the contrast that allows you to see your experiences clearly. You're left with one version of your life, told by a tired brain under dim light. And it's almost always harsher than it needs to be. But morning brings movement. Not just outside, but internally. Your cortisol levels begin to rise. Not in a stressful way, but in a way that helps wakefulness return. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reflection and reasoning, starts to re-engage. The default mode network, which fueled those long internal loops, begins to quiet. You regain access to regulation, to proportion, to softness. What felt like the absolute truth hours ago now feels like what it actually was, a temporary perspective filtered through emotional fatigue. This shift is especially noticeable for those navigating singlehood. At night, the absence of a partner can feel like the center of your identity. It defines the silence, magnifies the stillness, makes every missed message feel like a verdict. But in the morning, you remember, you are not only a person who is alone, you are a person with a whole life. One that includes solitude, yes, but also creativity, connection, movement, small joys. You remember the friends you have, the work you care about, the coffee you'll make, the walk you might take. You remember who you are outside of longing. Perspective doesn't negate your feelings, it frames them. It reminds you that emotions are real, but they're not always reliable narrators. That pain is valid, but it's not always precise. That the version of yourself you meet at night is part of you, but not the whole. And most of all, it reminds you that feelings pass. Even the deep ones, even the honest ones, even the ones that sound like truth. The return of perspective is not always loud. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest ways. You laugh at something you read. You remember a friend who makes you feel safe. You feel the sun on your face and exhale without realizing it. You check your messages and realize you're not invisible. You look in the mirror and see a face, not a flaw. These aren't grand revelations. They're gentle reminders. You are more than what the night told you. And if you still feel heavy in the morning, that's okay too. The return of perspective doesn't mean the pain disappears. It just means you can hold it differently now, with more space, with more breath, with a little less panic, because the night speaks in absolutes, but the day speaks in nuance. And the truth of who you are exists somewhere in between. So if you're waking up from a night that felt impossibly long, know this: you survived it. You didn't solve everything. You didn't have to. And now, slowly, gently, the world is returning to you. Not as proof that the night was wrong, but as a reminder that the night is not everything. There is life beyond the loop. There is softness beyond the silence. And there is perspective. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you stayed long enough for it to return. That's its own kind of healing. That's your own kind of strength. Some nights, the silence doesn't just feel empty. It feels accusatory, like it's trying to say something about who you are, about where you're supposed to be by now, about everything you haven't done, or everything you don't have, especially when you're single. You lie there, no messages lighting up your phone, no partner reaching for your hand, and the thoughts creep in like mist beneath a door. I should be past this stage. Everyone else has someone. I'm falling behind. But what if you're not behind? What if you're just in a quiet part of the journey, not a broken one? What if this moment right now, where nothing seems to be happening, is not a failure, but a pause? Our culture treats forward motion like the only valid direction. We're taught that progress must look a certain way: visible, measurable, shareable. A relationship by this age, a certain kind of home, a timeline that aligns with everyone else's, or at least one that looks good in photos. But healing is not a visible process. Becoming is not always something you can post about. And timing, real human timing, is not linear. It curves, it pauses, it loops back, it slows down when no one is watching. Especially when you're single, especially at night, especially in the space where nothing seems to be happening. But something is happening. Right now, in the quiet. You're learning to be with yourself without running. You're holding discomfort without numbing. You're asking harder questions. You're creating space, and space, uncomfortable as it is what makes growth possible. You're not behind. You're deep. And deep often doesn't look like forward. It looks like stillness, like uncertainty, like feeling everything and still showing up for the next breath. It looks like grieving the timelines you didn't meet and honoring the life that's unfolding anyway. It looks like sitting in your room at night with no one beside you and resisting the lie that this moment means you're losing. You're not. You're practicing presence, and presence often looks like nothing from the outside. Sometimes the path isn't clear because you're on a part of it that's being built under your feet. Sometimes the stars are still shining. You just can't see them through the clouds of self-comparison. And sometimes what feels like delay is actually protection. Life keeping you from rushing into something that's not ready or not right. Being single is not evidence of being behind. It's a kind of wilderness. And wilderness is where people go to find themselves when the world has gotten too loud with instructions. This is not punishment. It's not a glitch in your story. It's a sacred chapter. Quiet, overlooked, but vital. And if you're in it right now, know this. The silence around you does not reflect a lack of value. It reflects the space necessary for something honest to emerge. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a project that's off track. You are not a calendar that failed to fill itself in on time. You are a person, alive in the quiet, and the quiet is part of becoming. So when the thoughts return, the ones that say you're late, or you missed your window, or you're the only one still waiting, you don't have to believe them. You can tell them, I'm not behind. I'm building something, even if no one else can see it yet. And you can remember this gently. The stars are still out there, even when you can't see them. Progress is still happening, even when you can't measure it. And you are still unfolding, even in the dark. Being alone tonight does not mean you failed. It means you are alive, still breathing, still learning, still brave enough to be here in the quiet where so few people are willing to stay. That's not falling behind. That's becoming whole. And now, here you are, at the tail end of the night. Maybe you're still awake, the weight in your chest a little lighter than before. Or maybe your eyes are heavy, thoughts slowing down, body beginning to release what it's been holding for hours. Either way, you've made it through something. Not something loud, not something public, but something real. You moved through the silence. You stayed with the ache. You listened to your thoughts. And maybe, just maybe, you didn't believe all of them this time. And that matters. Because the hardest part of nights like these isn't just the loneliness. It's the way loneliness tries to rename you, to convince you that this is all you are, that the ache, the questions, the stillness, they define the entire landscape of your life. But they don't. The night is not the whole story. It is one page, one chapter, one color on the emotional spectrum of your being. And no matter how convincing it feels at 2 a.m., it does not get to name you. You are not your relationship status. You are not your missed calls. You are not the silence of your phone or the number of people who reached out today. You are not the ache in your chest or the absence in your bed. You are someone in transition. You are someone with a nervous system doing its best. You are someone learning to hold space for yourself in the hardest hour, not because you wanted to, but because that's what this night asked of you. That is not weakness. That is strength that whispers. And maybe this night didn't offer any new answers. Maybe it didn't solve anything. But you stayed. You softened. You listened more gently to yourself. And in a world that urges you to numb or rush or fix, is its own kind of healing. So as the sky begins to shift and the soft grey of early morning brushes against the edges of your room, let this be your reminder. You are not broken because you hurt. You are not behind because you're alone. You are not lost because you don't have it all figured out. You are in the night. That's all. And the night is tender. And the night is temporary. It will not always feel this way. You will not always feel this way. And even if tonight repeats itself again, even if there are more silent evenings, more aching hours, you'll know something you didn't before. That you can make it through. That you can hold your own hand in the dark. That the thoughts lose volume with compassion. That the quiet does not mean you are unloved. So let the story of tonight end not with certainty, but with softness. Not with answers, but with rest. And not with judgment, but with grace. You made it here. You showed up for yourself. And maybe, if only for a few breaths, you felt a little less alone. That matters more than you know. The night doesn't define you. It simply passes through you. And so gently, friend, let it pass. Let morning come. Let yourself rest. You are okay. You are becoming. And you are not alone in this.